Today we're finishing up our Moving Mountain series where really we've just been talking about what the vision is that God has for Church 8025 and where He's leading us to move and what that looks like, and specifically raising awareness on raising some funds to be able to build as we move into the Cottonwood location. And so if you've missed any of the last 2 weeks, I would really encourage you to go back and watch those. We just want you to know the vision of 8025. We want you to be fully on board with that. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a recap. I promise I'm not re-teaching those two messages, so we won't be here that long today. But I do want to give you a little recap. And our theme for Moving Mountains is this verse right here, Mark 11:23. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him. And I have this. You can actually download that as a wallpaper for your phone. We've given out some little clings. There's some in the back with this verse on it. And we want you to keep this in front of you, because this is exactly what we're doing, is we're calling out to God and saying, hey, we believe you're doing something. You're up to something. And at the same time, it's not a little something. It does feel like a mountain. And so we need God to show up to move this mountain. And so we hope that you would commit this to memory, that you would put this in front of you, and that you would pray this often over our church. And so we began by looking at the story of Nehemiah. You may or may not be familiar with that, but Nehemiah was a man who had a burden for his people, and in that burden he spent time with God. And then because of his time with God, he was willing to sacrifice, which we understand we're asking all of you to do, all of us to do. And then God blessed. And then last week, Joe talked specifically about generosity in all areas of our life, not just finances. And he taught us what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 9. Paul says this: the point is this, the person who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and the person who sows generously will also reap generously. Now, there's a lot of verses in Scripture that we have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out, what does this mean? What is he trying to say? This is not one of them. All right, this is pretty simple, and Joe did a great job teaching us this, because we want to be generous people in everything, right? We want to be generous in our regular giving through the church, but we want to be generous in our time with our neighbors. We want to be generous with the gifts that God has given us, both here in the church, but also where we work and where we live. We want to be generous, and then also in moving mountains. In fact, we believe in generosity so much you may not have been around at the very beginning of our church. We're about 2 years old, but in the early days, we started in August of 2020, which I don't know what you were doing then in August of 2020, but I was trying to remember how to multiply fractions so I could teach my kids, because they were at home with me all day. I still don't remember how to multiply fractions. I was like, I've never really needed it in life. You'll be fine. And so that's what I was doing in 2020. And in the middle of that, we just said, you know what a better time to plant a church than right now. And so we started Church 8025 and in a house. And there was just a few of us. And there was 12, 15 adults as we started out. And I started the very first series we ever did as a church was in Acts 2. Acts 2:42, where it talks about the followers of Jesus, the first church, how they got together. And it says they did this. They devoted themselves to teaching, to fellowship, to eating together. Amen? Eating together. That's my favorite one of all of them, to be honest. And prayer. And so that's where I started. And we taught through this each week. And as I was teaching through those and saying, hey, this is what we're going to be about. This is who we're going to be as a church. One of those families in our small group there, because it's COVID, got laid off. And they had a big family. Actually, they just got completely let go. They said, hey, we don't know when this is going to end. We're not going to be able to bring you back. And so, man, that was a hard time. And they were struggling. And so as we were praying about them and praying over them, I couldn't ignore what was in the rest of that passage in Acts. In Acts 2:45, it says, the church sacrificed to help those in need. Now, that wasn't part of my sermon series, so I could have just hoped nobody else read on further in Acts 2, but also one of our values was extreme generosity. And so there's 15 of us, and we've got $25,000 in the bank as a church. And the church wrote that family a check for $10,000 because we didn't know when they were going to get a job. Now, I don't know if you've ever started a business, but giving away half of your money in the first couple of weeks is not typically the way you start a business or even a church, most would say. But we just believe it's one of our values, extreme generosity. We give in a way that doesn't make sense. We want to give in a way that doesn't make sense. We get this out of 1 Timothy, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. We believe in generosity to the very core of who we are. And we've experienced as a church that God honors our faith in Him that leads to our generosity. God honors not when we say, hey, we've got plenty, so we will give some, but we're not sure how we can do this, but we are still going to give. And that includes in our time and our resources and certainly our money. And so as we go into moving mountains, we want to be generous as a church and as individuals. But moving mountains really is more than just raising money. It is that, but it isn't just that. And so if you've missed any or you're being caught up on what's going on, I want you to hear from others what they feel about 80-25 as well.
Church 80-25 has meant to me and Valerie and our family, community, friendships, support, encouragement.
Church 80-25 is like an extension of our family.
Our kids love going here. We know that the families care about us, that we care about them.
We get to do life with them, so the good times we get to celebrate. We're also there for each other for the hard times, to cry and pray for each other.
I've never been a part of a church like this where I saw people's fruits. You can just see Jesus' love shining through. When I came here, it was just like a whole different church community, and I was like, I want that, and I want that for my family.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael and I'm the lead pastor of Church 80-25 here in Thornton, Colorado. It's part of the Denver metro area. And over the last year, God has done some amazing things in the life of our church. From beginning in the living room at a home with just really a handful of people, to moving over to a movie theater and then moving again to where we are now in a local hotel. God has gone with us every step of the way on this journey. And we've seen men and women grow as devoted followers of Jesus through intentional, focused discipleship. In 2021, we gave away over $30,000 to mission work and church planting. We've seen people be the church where they live, work, and play. And more than anything, we've seen men, women, and kids come to faith in Jesus. We know God is at work because we see it with our own eyes.
You feel the momentum, you feel the push, you feel the passion behind it.
We believe that if this is God's will, He's going to move where He wants to move, and I believe that He's going to move here because He has been moving here.
It's been amazing seeing, faces that I know from outside of church that didn't even know Jesus coming to faith. And, most weeks we invite a new family into the church.
His plan is already in action. We're trying to do the best that we can to be stewards of what He's tasked us with and building this church and push forward with what we're here for.
Along the way, we've prayed for God to bring church partners, individual partners, and people of peace to Church 80-25. That may describe some of you watching this. And God has provided more than we could honestly have ever imagined. One of the ways He's provided that we've never expected Him to provide was through this building right here. In the summer of 2022, I received a phone call, really out of the blue, asking if our church was interested in a building. And as it turned out, this building and this land is right in the heart of the community we're trying to reach. So after some discussion and prayer, we were gifted this facility and almost 3 acres. And in that time, we were also able to raise $250,000 to go towards the renovation of the facility. And that includes everything from tearing down walls to new electrical to a full paint update inside and out. But let me share a couple of thoughts. First, we know God is going to move with or without a building and land. In fact, a building and land, they're not our goal. We just believe they're a tool that God will use as we live out the mission, which is to reach people who reach people to be fully devoted followers of Jesus. This permanent facility allows us to have a greater presence in our community as we reach people with the good news of Jesus. As we begin to plan to move from the hotel where we set up and tear down each Sunday, we're excited about the move God has for us. But the truth is, we believe it's a bigger move than just moving locations. As of today, when we move into the building we're renovating, we will be at max capacity from almost day one. And while we're very thankful and excited about this, we also know that how God is moving is just the beginning.
Church 8025 having a home of its own, allow the community to see us, come join us, and be excited about what we're doing.
They're understanding more of why to have a relationship with God. Like now they get to be a part of the church. One day they'll be able to continue this legacy and know that they were a part of working towards what God wanted Church 8025 to be and where He wanted us to be.
It's a growing area. There's a lot of new people coming to Colorado looking for churches. We can be out in the community finding those people, finding non-believers, and bringing them into our church and this community.
We're very passionate about the mission. We're passionate about reaching people, passionate about the mission behind what the gospel is. We know what's going to come along the way with that. We know the lives that are going to be touched and the lives that are going to be changed.
Our theme for this undertaking is moving mountains. In Mark 11, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him." And we believe God has told us to move, not just locations, but in preparation for the coming years, so we are going to move. Now, we know it is God who will move the mountains, and we believe we're praying in alignment with His will for Church 8025 and stepping out on faith. And we have no doubt that God is going to provide above all we ask or think. And as we move in accordance to God's will, we believe we need to raise approximately $2 million to build on the land that we have been given. And this money will go towards building a facility that houses an auditorium, offices, kids space, and more under one roof. That will also allow us the room we need to grow as we continue to reach people. The building we have just renovated will then be able to be used for student and community space. This would allow us to move from nothing to everything, offices, auditorium, kids space, community space, that we could use 7 days a week to be a light to our city. So we want to invite you to do one thing, and really only one thing: pray. We want you, your team, your company, your family, your church to ask God how He would have you sacrificially give to help establish a church focused on sharing Jesus with others in a community in need of Jesus. Ask God and listen to Him. We believe God is moving a mountain here in Thornton, and we want to invite you to see if God wants you to be a part of making an eternal difference here in Colorado. You can learn more about specific ways to pray, how to give, as well as download more resources about this at church8025.com/movingmountains. And let me say thank you. Thank you to those who have been with us on this journey since day one, to those who have joined us along the way, and to those who are considering playing a part now. You may never know in this life the eternal difference your prayers and support have made. So thank you, and God bless. We are excited about the people that God has brought to 8025. And so this is on our website, this video, if you want to look at it or share it with anybody else. But we really are excited. We're excited about the lives that are being changed, those who are coming to faith in Jesus, those who are growing in their walk with Jesus. We're excited about you living on mission. And even just this morning talking about our new ministry partner and just looking at you, I was just kind of overcome with love and appreciation for all of you and who you are. We're excited about you reaching people to be fully devoted followers of Jesus. And if you're not really sure how to do that, we want to help you. That's what we're here to do. We don't believe that just bring people in here and we'll take care of them. We want to equip and train people to teach others about Jesus where you live. And so we are excited about what is happening. And many of you have been a part of planting and seeing lives change, and you've taken that commitment. You have made that commitment. And for a few minutes, that's really what I want to talk about, that word commitment. Commitment is the state of being dedicated to a cause or an activity. That's what commitment is. And the truth is, we're not committed to a whole lot of things in life, right? We're kind of committed to a sports team until they can only, kick field goals, and then we're going to give up on them, and we're like, we'll be committed next year, right? We're kind of committed to a few things. Some of you are very committed to the gym. Some of us are kind of committed, and by that I mean we give them our money, but we don't actually go to the gym. And so commitment's not something that we really, a lot of times in life understand. I mean, we say we're committed, but what we mean is if it doesn't really cost us anything, if it's easy, if it doesn't interfere with other things that are more important. Maybe the greatest example of commitment that we understand is one of marriage. I looked for my wedding vows. I was going to read those to you today. It's going to be awesome, but also I couldn't find them. So anyways, I'm sure they were great, and I meant every word of them, but don't judge me. You probably can't find yours either, and I know you don't still remember them, okay? But that's a moment in life where you make a commitment in front of everyone else, and I know I did, but certainly, hopefully you took your vows, your commitment to your spouse seriously. Like, I don't think anybody stood up in front of everybody and said, in front of everyone today, we're going to give this a try, see if it works, right? Like that's not the type of commitment that you make. And why is that? Why is that not the commitment level? Why do you commit to something at a high level? I think it's because of this. I think we truly commit to something when we truly believe it's bigger than we are, right? We truly commit. We'll go all in on something when we really believe that it's something bigger than we are. That's when commitment lasts. That's when we will fight for that commitment. That's when we'll do whatever it takes. That's when nothing will distract us from that commitment. And so the last several weeks, we've been asking you to pray about sacrificing. We've encouraged you to be generous in every area of your life, and specifically we've asked in giving to Moving Mountains, and we have asked you to make a commitment. And so for a few minutes, we're going to look at what happens when we make commitments, because a lot happens when we make commitments, especially commitments that are in line with God and are led by God. And so anytime God places a burden on your life like he has ours as a church, you need to understand that the enemy is going to lie to you. Like the enemy does not want this to grow. Okay, Satan does not want 80-25 to reach more people and make a difference. And so we're going to look at how he lies. I think it's 3 key ways. And let me give you a little background. As I said, we started in Nehemiah a few weeks ago, and we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 6 today if you want to turn there. But in case you missed it, Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king. That means he was one of the most trusted men in the kingdom. And so his city, Jerusalem, that he had lived in, that he had been taken captive from, or his people had been taken captive from, had been raided over 100 years ago. And Nehemiah grew up now in a foreign land. And so he gets word that his city, even though people were allowed to go back to it, it was still destroyed. It really hasn't been built back up. And specifically, the walls around it had not been restored. And that's important in those days because if you didn't have walls for defense, you would never make it as a city or a country. And so he's told this, and he's brokenhearted. He has a burden for it. And he prays for 4 months about it. And then he goes to the king because he was the cupbearer. He was often before the king. And he went in front of the king with a sad countenance, which you did not do. That could get you killed. But he did that because he was willing to sacrifice for the burden God had put on his heart. And the king gives him favor. He sends him back. He lets him go of his job, sends him back. Not only does he send him back to his home, he sends him back with basically a military escort so that he's safe. And he also says, hey, I'm even going to pay for the lumber to rebuild the wall. And I know you're thinking, Michael, you could have just preached that message like that on week 1 and we got out early for lunch. But anyways, that's the recap. And so we left Nehemiah on his way to build, and today we're going to see where his sacrifice led. And it says this in Nehemiah 6 in verse 1. When Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and that no gap was left in it, though at the time I had not installed the doors in the city gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me a message, come, let's meet together in the villages of the Ono Valley, and they were planning to harm me. And here's the first lie when we make a commitment. It's a lie of distraction. When you make a commitment to God, Satan will use everything he can, including other people, to try and distract you from what God has called you to do. Have you ever been distracted before? I've been distracted. One of the easiest ways I get distracted, maybe I'm the only one who's ever done this, but you can relate. I'll pick up my phone to look at something, and then I can't remember what I was going to look at because I start talking to somebody, right? And I'm holding my phone going, I needed to do something on here. And I'm distracted. Something distracts me. We all get distracted. Maybe distraction is not always a bad thing, right? These guys just wanted to meet with Nehemiah. So maybe distraction is not always a bad thing. But here's the thing. If it stops you from doing what God has called you to do, then it is a lie from Satan that he is sneaking into your life in the form of a distraction. Satan will lie to you. All of these men who wanted to meet with Nehemiah were men from other nations, and they did not want this wall rebuilt. They didn't want it rebuilt. They did not want Jerusalem restored to power. They wanted to distract Nehemiah from what God had called him to do. And I'm here to remind you today that if you make a commitment to God, both in moving mountains and just in your life, people will try to distract you. Let's keep reading. There's a second lie in verse 4. The second lie is this. 4 times they sent me the same proposal. So 4 times they come and ask, hey, let's have a meeting. And I gave them the same reply. And Sanballat sent me this message a 5th time by his aide. So 5 times they're trying to distract him. By his aide who had opened the letter in his hand, and in it was written, it's reported among the nations, and Geshem agrees, that you, the Jews, plan to rebel. And this is the reason you're building a wall, according to these reports. Here it is. Because you are to become their king. And have even set up the prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim on your behalf there is a king in Judah. Here's the second lie you know will happen, a lie about the mission. Others are going to try to change the mission when you make a commitment to God. The mission for Nehemiah was not to become king. That is not why he went back. The people around him who disagreed with him, who didn't like what he was doing, didn't like that he was trying to build this wall, who were maybe jealous of him, they couldn't distract him from his mission, so they tried to lie about the mission and get it changed. When you make a commitment to God, again, whether it's in moving mountains or in life, if the enemy cannot distract you from it, he will try to get you to change the mission. Because that feels spiritual, doesn't it? Like we can just shift it a little bit. And we're still doing something for God, right? But if it's not the mission that he gives us, then it is the wrong mission. And people will say, or you will hear the enemy lie to you, hey, you can give money over here instead. Hey, you can save money for later. Hey, you can use your gifts to help somewhere else. Don't use your time right now. Later in life, you're going to have more time. You can use that time. You're not really breaking a commitment. You're just kind of shifting it. But here's the problem with that is this. Partial obedience is not obedience. If you're a parent, you're like, amen to that, right? Like none of us parent our kids to kind of obey because that's disobedience. Well, why do we think when God calls us to something and we commit to him that he will honor, bless, or accept partial obedience from us? He will not. When God burdens our hearts, when he calls us to commit to something, he expects full obedience. And so the first lie from the enemy is to distract you. The second one is to try to get you to change your commitment. If neither one of those works, look at the third lie, verse 7. According to these reports, you are to become their king. And he even set up the prophets in Jerusalem. So he says, this is what we've heard. But there is a king in Judah. And these rumors will be heard by the king, right? The king who let Nehemiah go. So come, let's confer together. If they can't get you distracted, if they can't get you to change the mission, here's how they're going to lie to you. They're going to lie to you about the future. Right? They tried to distract Nehemiah and it didn't work. They tried to change his mission and it didn't work. So they lied to him about the future to try to cause him to have fear and panic and worry. They said if we can't stop the commitment logically, right, through a distraction, if we can't stop it physically through changing the mission, then we're going to do it through emotions. We're going to try to raise fear in him. Because here's what Nehemiah knew that everybody knows. You should know this too. Guess what kings don't like a second one of? Other kings. Yeah, that's right. That's not a real popular way to rule. They're usually not taking applications for a co-king. They don't like it. And so they reach out to Nehemiah and said, listen, man, we know you don't want to be king, but the king has heard that you want to be king. And so he's not happy. Like he's probably going to come kill you. This is never going to get finished. We're never going to finish this. So let's just talk about it and figure out a better plan. And when you and when I make commitments to God, especially in our finances, but in every area of our life, Satan is going to lie about your future to cause you to worry. I guarantee you it's going to happen. He is going to lie to you so that you have fear. And people will speak into your life and say things like, can you really afford that sacrifice? How about you just do part of what God's calling you to do? He'll understand. If you do everything that's on your heart right now that God's there in your heart, man, it's going to make life hard. Right now, in this time of year, man, this is an election year. What if the Republicans win? You don't know what's going to happen. What if the Democrats win? You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. And Satan will lie to you to cause fear. And here's why. Because fear paralyzes us, doesn't it? It paralyzes us. When you're afraid, you do not move forward. Have any of you ever been bungee jumping? Anybody? Bungee jumping? Nobody in here? This is our next church activity, people. We don't have the money to do a real one, but we'll rig it up with some guys, okay? Trust me, it'll be safe. Joe will test it out. That is shocking to me that nobody has been bungee jumping. Well, apparently I'm the only moron who's gone bungee jumping. But I remember in high school, I was in Florida, and we were going to go bungee jumping. And I went up the stairs. And, you know, the stairs are like those graded metal, you know. I don't know why they do that. I think so it just builds the fear because you can see down. And so we're going up, and the guy in front of me was like 5'8", but just jacked. You know what I mean? Like his muscles had muscles on them. You know, he had no neck. His chin went straight into his shoulders. And like he was turning the stairs like this. You know, he was just huge. And I remember walking behind him with my friend like, golly, this guy is a monster. And so he gets up, he gets the harness put on and the bungee cords attached. And here's what they tell you to do when you bungee jump. If you've never been, so I'm going to tell you, okay? So you'll be ready when we have our church activity. There's like a little line on the edge of the rail, and they say, put your toes over the line, right? And it's super scary because you know what you think is going to happen? You're going to accidentally what? Except for in just a minute, what are you about to do? Yeah, you're going to do it on purpose. But anyways, they tell you to put your toes over the line. And this guy is all just, you know, strapped in his harness. And he waddles up here to the line, you know. And he puts his toes over the line. And for the next 10 minutes, I stand behind him. And he can't move. He can't jump. And I know you were probably shocked at this. But I had lots of jokes. Because he's this big, buff dude, and I'm a junior in high school. And I make jokes about it. And he was so scared that I'm not even sure he heard my jokes because he didn't turn around and kill me, okay? And he could have. And so for 10, 15 minutes, he stands there, and his fear paralyzed him. He never jumped. He finally backs up and says, I can't do it. And he has to walk down the stairs. As he passed me, I kind of swelled up a little bit. I didn't. I moved out of his way. I was like, please, sir, go on down. Fear paralyzes us. If Satan can lie to you to cause you to be afraid, you'll stop what you're doing. You won't keep going with your commitment. And that might make sense in bungee jumping, but here's the thing. There may be fear in obedience, but fear cannot take the place of your obedience. It doesn't mean when we obey, there will not be fear in that moment. Certainly, Scripture is full of men and women doing things God has called them to do, and they were afraid. But fear cannot take the place of your obedience. It is not acceptable to say, hey, I will obey when I'm no longer afraid. In your commitment to God, you will be lied to distract you, to change the mission, and to cause fear, just like Nehemiah was. But we need to remember what Nehemiah remembered. Look back in verse 2. They're saying, hey, come, let's get together, let's meet. And Nehemiah sent messengers back to those men, and I love this. It says, I'm doing an important work, and what? Read those 3 words with me. I'm doing an important work and cannot come down. Like, hey, I don't have time for this. Why should the work cease while I leave it to go down to you? Here's what you need to remember. Why are you committed? Why are you committed? You've got to remember, because you're doing an important work. When God calls you to a commitment, he's calling you to something that matters, that something is important, and that is something that will last through eternity. When God calls you to that, you have to remember, just like Nehemiah, until it is fulfilled, or God calls you out, that you are doing an important work and you can't stop. You cannot come down. Don't let others distract you. Don't distract yourself. Focus on God's call. But we don't just need to remember why we're committed. Look at Nehemiah in verse 8. They're trying to get him down. They're trying to get him to come meet with them. He says, you're making these things up in your own mind. And then he says, they will, if we stop now, they will drop their hands from the work, and it will never be finished. And here's what you have to remember about your commitment. You have to remember why you can't get distracted. Because if you get distracted, it will never be finished. Right? If you get distracted, it will never be finished. It will push off whatever God is doing, and God is calling us to something bigger than ourselves. That's why you are here. That's why you have committed in the first place, because you believe that God's kingdom is bigger than your kingdom. You're committed to something greater than yourself. But listen, if a lie of distraction or a lie to change the mission works with you, then that commitment will never get finished. And understand this. Understand what I'm saying here. God's in charge of building his church, okay? That's not my job. That's not my responsibility. I'm called to make disciples. You're called to make disciples. He will build his church, okay? We've got a big task in front of us, and God's going to do what God's going to do. But when I say God will not finish, what I'm more talking about than raising money or building a building or growing Church 8025 to reach more people is that he may not finish what he's trying to do in your life, right? When you stop on your commitment to God, what God is trying to teach you, how God is trying to bless you, how God is trying to use you stops. Because you have stopped that commitment. So we can't stop. We have to remember that what he's doing in us will not be finished. And finally, and maybe most importantly, when we're being lied to about the future, and we're asking questions like, how can we make this? How can we finish this? How are we able to do this? How are we going to be able to get it done? What do others think about us? Remember what Nehemiah said. I love this. I love this. In verse 9, Nehemiah says, but now, hey, I can't come down. We're not going to stop. It's got to get finished. But now, my God, strengthen my hands. Here's what you have to remember. Who's going to carry you through? It's God who's going to strengthen your hands. It's not you. Can I tell you a secret? This is a secret. Okay, everybody lean in real quick. It's a secret. I don't want anybody else to hear. You're not in charge of your money. You're not in charge of your time. You're not in charge of your resources. It's God's. It's God's. God gives and God takes away. God is the giver of life. God is the sustainer and provider. And we hold on so tightly, like, I'm in charge of all this. I'm in control of all this. And God's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. We have to remember that it's God who is going to carry us through. If God called you something, if he called you to a commitment, whether it's moving mountains or any other, it is God who will see you through. God will make the way. God will provide. God, listen to me, God did not call you to something or to a place to leave you there on your own to figure it out. He didn't call you there and go, okay, it's all yours now. That's not how God operates. If he has called you something, if God has called you to this commitment or any other, God will see you through it. And we believe that God has called Church 8025 to something that is way bigger than ourselves. We believe that the church here, this specific church, this local church, is making a difference in our community. It's impacting people's lives. And we believe God is using you to bring good news to people about Jesus. Even at the workday the other day, some guys said, man, I didn't even know some of the people there. Because you are reaching the people around you. You're reaching others with the good news of Jesus. And God will honor our commitments. God will honor and bless, and we believe he's going to multiply. In fact, on your seats, there's Ephesians 3, 20 through 21. But this verse is asking God to do more than we have ever hoped or imagined. And we are asking God to do that. And we believe that he will. So, listen, if you're a guest today, if you're visiting, if you've been checking us out for a little bit, man, we're so thankful for you that you're here. And I want you to know, all we want you to know is that Jesus loves you. And that Jesus died on the cross for your sins. That your worst day and your best day doesn't get you into heaven. It's Jesus' death on the cross and resurrection that saves you. And that's why we're here. Because we want you to know. And that's all we want from you today. But if you have called Church 8025 home, if this is a community for you, we've talked about this the last few weeks. And hopefully you have been praying over these commitment cards. And I would ask each of you to grab one that's in the seat around you now. We're going to ask you under the assumption that you have been praying about this as a family and what you're going to commit as we try to raise $500,000 as a church to go towards our home. I'm going to answer some questions in a moment about this, but in the next couple of minutes, what I'm going to ask you to do, if you haven't already made that commitment, for you to do that today. You'll have another chance next time we gather the last week of November. But if you are ready today, as we just take a moment, bow,